Hello and welcome to this episode of Real Lives. And today I'm absolutely delighted to be talking to Terry McDoodle, who is executive and career coach and best-selling author of Winning the Game of Work. And that's a fantastic title. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to write the book.
Well, Jackie, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for having me as a guest today. And what inspired me to write the book was really, I'll tell you the short story to begin with.
Okay.
I was very ambitious in my career, and in the early days, I was really confused about why I was working so hard and I wasn't getting the results that I wanted. After I worked for a while and I was mentored and I hired some coaches, I started learning the rules of what you really need to do to have the impact that you want to have at work. And I decided to put that all down in the book to share with other people.
Okay, that sounds really interesting. I think we can all relate to that as well. Tell me a little bit more about the book. What sort of guidance does the book give people?
Well, the book provides, I'd say it really focuses on both internal and external keys to success. And when I say internal, what I mean is shifting the mindset, really examining our beliefs about what we think is going to get us the results that we want at work. And a lot of times what holds people back is a belief that isn't going to get them where they want to go. And an example of that is a lot of times people put their future career success in the hands of their bosses. They think, well, if I'm going to get ahead, my boss needs to look out for me. And the reality is that we need to advocate for ourselves, and we need to expand our influence beyond just our boss. We're basically responsible for ourselves and our own career success. And then from an external standpoint, it's really like, what do you need to do specifically to have the results that you'd like to have? And so I provide a lot of tips and tricks on what you actually need to do. And I'll just give one example. I really have people look at what I call their leverage points, because a lot of times we're working way too hard and not getting the return on the work that we put in. And it could be because we're working on the wrong things. It could be because we're not prioritizing. It could be because we're not delegating things that we should be. I tell them, let's take a look at your leverage points. Are you prioritizing? Are you delegating? Are you communicating clearly? How's your time management? And once we take a look at that, and then a lot of times they find that, oh, maybe I don't really need to do that. Or maybe if I start with the bigger, more important projects, that those little things don't actually even need to be done. But a lot of times we'll tell ourselves, and going back to those beliefs, we'll tell ourselves, like, I have to always have a clean desk at the end of the day. And, I'm gonna get fired if I don't do absolutely everything and return every email. And I'll tell you, like, in my career, I actually observed a lot of people that I didn't think personally were doing a great job, but yet they would get promoted. And what I realized as I went through my career is that they were focusing on the right things. So yeah, maybe they didn't come to a meeting, maybe they didn't return an email, and that annoyed me, but they were focused on the highest value work that they were expected to do, and they were meeting the expectations of the leaders within the company, even if they let some other things fall by the wayside.
May I ask which industry you're in, or are you still in that industry?
I'm not anymore. I was a marketer for 30 years, and the bulk of my career was spent in financial services. So I worked for two very large banks for 21 years. And in that time, I worked on a lot of different businesses. The last 12 years of my career, I had risen to the level where I was heading marketing for the businesses that I worked in.
Okay, because a lot of the things you've talked about and the tips you've given expand to everyday life as well, don't they? It's not just within the work environment. They sound like really good life skills.
Absolutely. These ways of thinking, and these tips and tricks can be applied to our day-to-day lives as well.
Mm. So you say you're no longer within that industry. So what are you actually doing now?
I'm an executive and career coach now, and I made that shift in 2017. As I mentioned, I'd been at that company for 12 years. And over the course of that time, it just got to a point where there really weren't opportunities there that were of interest to me.
Mm.
So I did a little self-reflection, and I said to myself, what do I like to do and what do I think I'm good at? And one of the things that I spent a lot of time and energy on whenever I was a leader was coaching and mentoring people that were on my teams. And I got a lot of satisfaction out of that, and I got feedback from people that I was good at it and they appreciated the perspective and the lessons that I taught them. So that made me actually decide to go back and get a certification in coaching. So I went through a program and then decided to become an entrepreneur. And so I do this full time now.
Excellent, excellent. Where in that timeline did the book emerge?
The book came out in April of 2020, and I started writing it in July of 2019. Although I mentioned earlier, like the short story and the longer story of where the book came from. When I first left my last job, I think like anybody, like when you've been in a job for a while, you tolerate certain things, right? And when I left, I didn't really have to tolerate those things anymore. And so I think there was a lot of stuff coming up that I needed to process. So I started a blog, and it was really me thinking back over my career and writing about different lessons and scenarios and situations. And I did that blog for a couple years. And at some point, somebody said to me, Terry, you probably have enough words in your blog to write a book. Okay. And so that made me go back, and I downloaded everything. I did a word count, and I had like 25 or 30,000 words. And sure enough, that's definitely enough for a book. And then coincidentally, a friend of mine was going through a book writing program, and she gave me information on it, and I decided to join the program as well. And so, I wrote a lot more after the blogs, but it gave me sort of a foundation and seeds of the book. There's all my thoughts and lessons, but I also interviewed 11 people for the book about their careers. Because one of the things that I think that I thought, and I think a lot of other people think, is that when you see somebody who's in a high level position, or they're successful, a lot of times we can think that they just sort of got on an escalator and they just rose to the top of their profession, and they never had any struggles or anything. And as I was going through my life and I was getting to know people, and I'd see like, wow, they're really successful, but then I'd learn about their stories. I was like, okay, they had a really interesting journey. So I sort of collected people along the way, and I went back and asked them if I could interview them. So it's, certain, some people, they were successful, but they had been fired a few times. Another guy who had gone to a really great university and got a job in an economic consulting firm or something like that, and he hated it. He said he would like fall asleep at his desk all the time, and he finally got fired. Eventually he started a business, and at first the business was actually teaching people how to tell stories, a storytelling business. Right. And at first he was just like barely making it. He was having to work in a grocery store part-time just to make things ends meet. And then he got interviewed in the New York Times, and he said he didn't even think that the interview was ever going to print. And then one day, without him even knowing it, he was on the front page. There was a picture of him leading one of his classes on the front page of the New York Times business section. And then his phone started ringing off the hook. He's getting, flown out to like Google to talk to high level executives there about doing workshops. And then funny enough, or not funny for him, certainly, but because he had been so poor for so long, he did not plan well for taxes. And so he got to the point where he had a really big tax bill, and he was afraid he was going to go bankrupt. So, but then of course it got better from there. So my point was just to tell the ups and downs of other people's career stories, because when we see it from the outside, we just think like, oh, they just magically appeared there and they're like happy and they didn't have to work that hard. They never had any struggles. And every person that I talked to had some really dramatic things happen in their careers, but you wouldn't know it from just meeting them on the street.
Yeah. I think this is what's really nice about stories and storytelling and listening to people's lives, is that they're inspirational. They make you aware that your life isn't always easy, and sometimes it can be something like getting fired that's actually a good thing, not a bad thing, because it changes your pathway and opens new doors, and it takes you out of a rut that you might be in. So about some of these negatives are actually quite positive,
Sure.
to shift and move things.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times people will ask me like, okay, what was your biggest failure or something like that? And I always find that really hard to answer, because I actually don't consider things that happen to be failures, because it's only a failure if you don't learn the lesson from it and you don't get up and keep going. A lot of times things that hurt a lot actually spur us on to do even greater things, or to, find a path that's a better, happier path for us.
Yes, absolutely. On a personal level, what was it like to produce the book and have it published and then become a bestseller?
Well, it was a journey, I will tell you that. I mean, I worked in marketing for a long time, and I did a lot of writing and editing, and, I got a lot of things printed in my career. So coming into the book writing, I was like, I even thought at some point that like, oh, maybe I can just write a book on my own and I could figure it out. But I'm very glad I went through the program, because there were a lot of, kind of blind alleys that you don't know about unless somebody guides you through it. But it was definitely a bit of a roller coaster ride, because I'll say that number one, like writer's block is a real thing. And a lot of times I actually can write pretty easily, but at times I was feeling actually fearful, because I thought I would put so much effort into this. And I thought, oh, what if people really think it sucks? What if it's terrible? What if I did all of this and it was horrible? I really had to, really bring myself out of this a lot of times and just sort of rationalize it and think like, well, you've read lots of books and parts you liked and parts you didn't. And so I just realized that like, okay, not everybody's going to love it. Some people will. Going through the book writing program was really helpful, because if I ever felt kind of low or I felt stuck, that I could reach out to other people that were in the program and just commiserate and say, hey, are you feeling this way too? And that was really helpful. But it was just something I had to just keep going. And actually, the person who told me about the program and who, started the same time I did, she actually hasn't published her book yet. So, and I think it's because I can't speak for her, but I do think that it's a little bit of that like concern, like, is it going to be good enough? And I just kind of got to a point where I was like, it is going to be what it is. And I actually think that it turned out really well. I've gotten I've got a lot of great reviews out on Amazon, and a lot of people have reached out and said, oh, wow, I just read this chapter and oh my gosh, it's exactly what's happening for me at work right now. And this is really helpful. Or, other people coming and saying, hey, I read this chapter on Jennifer and wow, it was so inspirational. So I think that those career stories have been very meaningful to people.
And that's really worthwhile, isn't it? I mean, it really makes the time and effort that you've put into it worth it. Who do you work with now? Do you work with organizations? Do you work with individual people?
I work with both. So in some cases, a company will hire me to work with somebody in their organization. Maybe they have somebody who they think is high potential, or somebody who's gotten promoted and they need some help sort of adjusting to that higher level role. And then I also will work with people who they just recognize that I'm feeling really stressed out at work and I need some support and I need to figure out how I can, balance my home and life, or I need to figure out how I can, communicate more effectively with my boss, or there's any number of situations that people come to me for. And also I work with people who are in job search as well to help them just, do everything from get their resume together. A lot of people that come to me want to have some kind of shift, right? Like they work in one industry and they want to go to another one, and they want somebody to help them figure out what kind of transferable skills they have, and also takes a little bit of strategy to change industries.
Yeah.
Strategize about what they need to do, because typically just applying for jobs online, if you're switching industries, won't be successful.
Mm-hmm. How's the current situation with the pandemic affected your work?
From a day-to-day standpoint, it hasn't impacted like what I do in terms of, I was working from my home like 90% of the time anyway. So, because I meet with people by phone or by Zoom, and my clients are all over the country. So it wasn't like I was going to meet with all of my clients in person. I did occasionally meet with some of my clients in person if they lived near me. Maybe we'd meet at a coffee shop or their office or something like that. So that's not part of it. But I did do a lot more in-person networking before, and obviously I'm not doing that anymore. I do miss getting out and seeing people. In terms of, on the other side of the table, what I'm seeing with my clients is obviously, there's been a big economic impact. And so the part of my business that focuses on job search has, it's been busy. I am happy to report that at first, when the pandemic first hit and people were coming to me for job search, I was worried because I, as a coach, I want to help them get jobs.
Yes.
And actually, I've been pleasantly surprised at how active the hiring market has been. I've worked with a lot of people that have gotten laid off, have applied and interviewed, gotten hired, and started all virtually. So yeah, a lot of the business environment has shifted pretty easily. Now, I will say that there are some sectors, like I had a client that we worked together for a few months, and she was in the hospitality industry, and she's still looking. I mean, there's some industries, I think it's going to take a really long time to come back.
Yes,
and that's tough and it's heartbreaking. With the other part of my business, with people that have jobs and they want to be more effective, that's actually there's been an uptick there as well. And I think that I would say that's because people's perspectives have changed. They've been forced to change, right? When you're working from home,
yes.
As so many people are, they can really start looking at their jobs a little bit differently, and maybe something that was uncomfortable, but they were just sort of caught up in the routine of their day-to-day job. They just didn't think about it. But now, when they're trying to homeschool their kids and get on conference calls and all of that, if they had some things about their job they didn't like before, it's come into stark relief, right? Like, okay, maybe I need to do something about this. So that has spurred some people on to say, you know what, now's the time to do this. I've been thinking about it for a while, and I'm just going to do it, maybe because they've got a little bit more time in their day because they're not commuting or something like that.
Yeah. It has. I think it has changed the way the world of work and the way people view work. I think some of those things will stick for sure.
I think so too. Yeah, I really feel like the pandemic has fast forwarded some trends that were already underway. Like at my last company, they had gone to, instead of people having like the assigned seats on the floor, they went to a hotel model. I actually lost my office, which I wasn't happy about because I had an office for like 20 years. And then all of a sudden they were like, nope, unless you're, a very senior level executive, you do not get an office. You have to, book a place to sit every day. And the reason that they were doing that is that I think that they looked at the real estate and they're like, okay, a lot of times we come through and there's nobody sitting in these offices or cubicles. So let's reduce the number. And then also, people can work from home and that kind of thing. But I really think in some cases that maybe companies are just going to say everybody's going to, or, everybody in this department's just going to work from home, and you only come into the office under, some
it's really situation. Necessary. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I've heard that in Manhattan, some of the big banks have let a lot of real estate that they had leased go. Yeah. So, they'll probably after the pandemic, people will just be working from home.
Yeah. Yeah. What's is the one piece of advice from your book that you think will resonate mostly with the people that are listening or watching this video? What's the one thing that stands out in your book that you think could be of most benefit?
Well, the theme of the book that it's a purpose why I wrote the book, and it's woven throughout the whole thing, is that you deserve to be happy, and you can be successful and you can be happy with some shifts in mindset and maybe doing things a little bit differently. And, if there's a belief underneath that you can't be happy at work, it's something that needs to be reexamined, because life is short and life's way too short to be unhappy for as much time as we're spending at work.
Absolutely. If people wanted to get in touch with you, how can they get hold of you?
They can get a hold of me at my website, which is terrybmcdougall.com, or on LinkedIn. And my handle on LinkedIn is Terry B. McDougall.
Okay. We will be having those contact details underneath the video and on the contact card at the end of the video as well. It's been great talking to you. I think you give advice and words that are helpful to everybody, not only in the work situation, but in everyday life. Yeah, been great talking to you. Thank you so much for being on. People hopefully will contact you, and they can buy your book via Amazon, or can they access your book via other platforms as well?
It is available on Amazon worldwide. It is on some other platforms as well, and quite frankly, I'm not sure what all of them are. I think Barnes & Noble is one of them, but probably the easiest way outside the U.S. is to go through Amazon.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me today, and I wish you every success with the book, and maybe there will be a second edition.
I've been thinking about it. Jackie, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone that's listening and watching this Real Lives episode today. And if you've liked this, please subscribe and hit the notification button for the next episode of Real Lives. See you soon. Thank you.